What's good, Atlanta? This is the Blog and Dirty Podcast, where Dirty Bird is the word. If you haven't heard, I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer for FanSided. Once again, this is an Atlanta Falcons podcast for the FanSided site, Blog and Dirty. I'm John Buhler. I cover college football predominantly for the FanSided network of sites, but I'm also a diehard Atlanta Falcons fan. Before we begin, be sure to hit that like button. Smash that subscribe button. Give us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Really helps the show grow. Coming to you guys today, semi-live here on Wednesday, January 14th. Very exciting time here in Flowery Branch, Atlanta, and in Dirty Bird Nation, everything like that, and especially here with Blog and Dirty Bird Nation. Again, what's really important to understand here is we have a new era. We have an opportunity to really reset this franchise in a good way organizationally. There's plenty of talent on the football field. We just got to fine-tune things upstairs to get us the franchise that we deserve. So without further ado, I'm going to get started with our first run of the day. I'm running with Matt Ryan as being a breath of fresh air as the new president of football. He had his introductory press conference on Tuesday around this time yesterday. He got hired in this role that was effectively created for him by owner Arthur Blank on Saturday. There were four other guys that interviewed for this opportunity. Mike Disner, Brandt, Tillis, Josh Williams, and Ian Cunningham. Again, I'll touch on them probably here more so in a little bit as I kind of go through the process here. Okay, we got them all here. Get them all down. Anywho, doesn't matter. Matt Ryan is back in the building, and it couldn't be any better for the franchise. The reason I say it's a breath of fresh air is, look, Matt Ryan has been with the Falcons for the best and most consistent years in franchise history. He came to the franchise as the number 3 overall pick out of Boston College in the 2008 NFL Draft. He came after a pair of Longs, Jake Long to Miami, Chris Long to the Rams, and everything like that. Prior to Matt Ryan coming to Atlanta, the Falcons had never had back-to-back winning seasons, didn't make the playoffs in back-to-back years. There was a lot of things that he did here in Atlanta that were firsts. Won the franchise's first MVP, got them to a Super Bowl, won the NFC, got them to another NFC championship game, really brought along and ushered in some of the best years of football. Again, he played for 3 different head coaches. Initially, Mike Smith, when they first came in together in 2008. Then he played from Dan Quinn from 2015 to 2020. Raheem Morris may have been the interim, but he played the first year with Arthur Smith. And the reason I'm saying this is a breath of fresh air is, look, it feels like Matt Ryan never left, but you also think about it. He hadn't been part of the organization since 21. Again, that was Kyle Pitts' rookie year. That was Arthur Smith's first year as the head coach. That was Terry Fontenot's first year as GM. In 22, he got traded to the Colts for a 3rd-round pick, finished his career there. Then he spent the last 3 years, 23, 24, and 25, working for CBS in multiple capacities. I believe in 23, he was calling games, and then 24, 25, he worked more on the studio set alongside Bill Cowher, Nate Burleson, and, he worked James Brown, and then I think JJ Watt. I get the Watts confused. It's always does it. It's in my head. But hearing Matt Ryan be at the podium with Greg Beatles and Arthur Blank, it tells me that having a guy here who just had success anyway in Atlanta, regardless of how stable or unstable the franchise was at the time, that's going to put a very positive message out there to people who want to be part of this team. I think that ushers in an era of, an identity for both the players, the front office, and the coaching staff. And it leads me to believe that his football background, again, this is a new role for him. I've heard some people out there say this is more of a figurehead position. I think it's more akin to what John Elway did for a handful of years there in Denver. Again, it hit the fan there for him in the end, and obviously the Broncos have been better since Elway kind of left the building in some regards, but we need somebody to look to in the transitional period, because, again, I know Arthur Blank's still in charge. It does seem as though his middle son, Josh, is going to be the heir apparent here whenever that day comes. Again, Josh Blank's in his late 20s, early 30s. We'll see what he does. But anyway, anywho, just having Matt Ryan here, having just the respect and the adulation of the rest of the football world. Again, he played for the Colts, so he got to spend time with the late Jim Irsay, being on CBS. He got to be around all those other great guys. And I saw this out there. I forget exactly who said it. They said Matt Ryan is the nicest guy you'll ever meet, but he'll also hold people accountable. I've always attributed him to being effectively Peyton Manning light. They played similarly. They kind of had the same sort of personality, skill set. Peyton Manning was better. I get that. I'll admit that. Even though I'm not the biggest Peyton Manning fan in the world, I'm a massive Matt Ryan fan because I don't think his life was paid for him in gold. He mentioned in his first press conference in this new role, he'd only been to Atlanta twice prior to the draft process. He's from Philadelphia. He took his recruiting visit to Georgia Tech when he was in high school. And then I think Boston College played Georgia Tech in Atlanta. That's the only times he'd been to Atlanta prior to it. But, since coming here in 2008, he's made it his home. And I think that he embodies everything that we want. Look, Atlanta is a city of transplants. I'm not. My parents are. A lot of people will come to this great city and really build it into what it is. He knows that the city is distracted. There's a lot of fun, interesting things going on here. I mean, it's the mecca of culture in the Southeast. There's plenty of things to do. So people have other interests out there. But when they're good, when you can grab their attention, they'll come to you in a heartbeat. I know people will say that's bandwagon nonsense, but you know what? You gotta make people want to be a part of this. And that's the biggest thing for me. I think Matt Ryan adds a level of credibility that I think in a way, I know it's kind of come full circle, but Rich McKay kind of brought that initially when he came over from Tampa. He had been in the Buccaneers organization. Obviously, his late father, John McKay, was the iconic head coach there. Guy lost a lot for the Bucs, but also fantastic head coach at USC. I think when you have a guy who comes in here with fresh ideas, who's mid roots here, but has gone elsewhere, you come back a different person. Look, I did the same thing too with working at FanSided. When I first got hired back in around this time in 2018, I had to move to Chicago. We were not in a virtual world at that point. There was a lot of stuff in the office. I worked, in our Uptown office and then in our River North office. And obviously, COVID happened. Couldn't go into the office and work. My role changed. I ended up vying to come back to Atlanta and be close to my family. And so I moved back here in a summer of 21, and I've been here ever since. I feel like I'm a changed person. I feel, although this is where my roots are, I feel that Chicago experience shaped me in some way, shape, or form that I can't fully describe. Again, I don't want to go back because I don't want to relive some of the COVID horror stories. I don't want to know what repressed memories I've got in this noggin right here. But I do think Matt Ryan will bring things here to the Falcons organization that would just be maybe a few minor adjustments here that maybe weren't being discussed. And again, he says he knows everybody in the building. He knows Arthur, he knows Josh, he knows Greg, he knows Rustin Webster, he knows seemingly everybody of note in this organization. So you can get on the same page with them very quickly. And I think he's going to be I saw he had an interview where he was talking, about the game the Falcons played versus the Dolphins. And he suggested, open the roof, make the Dolphins play in terrible weather. Obviously, Mercedes-Benz Stadium is not really built for that. It'll open the roof, when the weather's nice, but, maybe get the fans involved. Again, we were one win away from making the playoffs. Could have beaten the Dolphins, should have beaten the Jets. Once again, this is the Blogging Dirty podcast. But yes, I'm over the moon with Matt Ryan being our new president of football. It does seem as though they're going to hire head coach first and then general manager, which again, I think seems counterintuitive. It'd be very Falcons for us to screw that up considerably. But I will say this. When has following the book, the rule of the law, really worked out for us? I mean, we're one of 12 teams that have not won a Super Bowl before. We've been to 2, lost them both in humiliating fashion in some instances. We got to do things differently. We are the oldest franchise in North America that has yet to win a championship. With the Texas Rangers winning the World Series in 2023, we're up there. It's like us and the Sabres, dude. And the Sabres are like the New York Jets of the NHL, for those who don't realize it. But we got to get back to the root of this thing. We got to make this better. And having Matt Ryan part of the organization does wonders. I also think having him here probably Curry's good favor and gets Julio Jones back on our side. We need everybody pulling the same direction here, and maybe Matt Ryan can be the galvanizing force that we need. So very excited to have him back. Okay, we'll see what impact he has on the team moving forward. So, and then that's what I got here with the first run. Let's move on to our second run of the day. I'm going to run with this. I think hiring either Klint Kubiak, Kevin Stefanski, or Mike McDaniel would be smart. I mentioned on last week's episode, again, we're only doing one a week now that it's in the off season. Got to pull back a little bit. It's been a grind. We're doing college and pro. Just keep going. That's football season for you. I mentioned hiring an offensive-minded head coach is something that is paramount and the organization needs to do. Now, I'm not going to say we need to only put ourselves into that box. That's where I'm leaning. My reasoning for this is because if you have a hot shot coordinator, he is going to get hired to be a head coach somewhere else. Now you not only have to replace him, you got to beat him. There's only 32 of these jobs. This is what happened with Kyle Shanahan. Again, I don't know if he was necessarily the right head coach for this team, but obviously Dan Quinn made a fantastic hire. It worked out in 2 years. Now he's still with the 49ers. Dan Quinn's about to be run out of his second NFL job. It's not going hot for him in Washington right now. Got to hire new coordinators because that's kind of what he does. But for those of you who need a refresher of what's going on, Klint Kubiak is the offensive coordinator there for the Seahawks. Kevin Stefanski is the former head coach of the Browns. And Mike McDaniel is the former head coach of the Dolphins. There are other offensive minds out there. I know we've had Mike McCarthy, the former Packers and Cowboys head coach, is a guy who's potentially out there. Joe Brady, the Bills offensive coordinator, is another candidate as well. But I kind of have honed in on these three. And I think each one of them provides something that I think could help this team get over the top. I think right now Kubiak is my favorite pick to be a head coach, although we have an awful history of hiring head coaches. The best head coaches we've ever had are Lehman Bennett, who I don't remember because didn't exist at that point, and Dan Reeves, who was a retread. Maybe a retread, something that we need to consider because although Raheem Morris was one, Arthur Blank typically goes for guys who have never been an NFL head coach before, and it usually blows up in our face. With Kubiak, he is another McVay-Shanahan disciple. He is the son of former Broncos Super Bowl winning head coach Gary Kubiak, one of the greatest head coaches in the Texans history, former John Elway backup there in Denver for a long time. Kubiak had been the OC for the Saints last year. Obviously didn't work out there with the tail end with Dennis Allen. But obviously Mike McDaniel, a guy who we probably should have hired instead of Raheem Morris 2 years ago, really has Seattle as arguably my pick to win the Super Bowl right now. Again, at the start of the year, I picked the Ravens to beat the Eagles, and they're both out. And Ravens didn't make the playoffs. I kind of became infatuated with the Rams, that we played them, and that kind of concerned me. I think with Kubiak, he's a guy that I think will elevate the role of Michael Penix Jr. And again, I think there's only two players that Matt Ryan mentioned in his press conference. He mentioned Michael Penix Jr. because he was asked by that, and he obviously brought up Bijan Robinson on his own accord. And again, trying to play down the middle of this. This is a new regime. We'll see what Matt Ryan and whoever else comes into the building ultimately decides to do. Kubiak it seems like it fits. It seems like and I'll get to the guy who Atlanta might be hiring for GM. We'll see what happens here. His team's still in the playoffs too. There's a symmetry sort of thing. You're looking for a guy that I think when you hire somebody off of the McVay-Shanahan tree, and again, all three of these guys check that box in some way, shape, or form. I mean, half the league is like you can't be that obtuse to it. That gives you an opportunity to basically retain Jeff Ulbrich as defensive coordinator. You can really build on that. Maybe he gets an opportunity to be a head coach for real at some point. I think you kind of get a guy who's ascending as opposed to a guy that like clearly the Browns and Dolphins didn't want. Kubiak, I think, obviously you can lean on his dad, Gary, in a little bit in some instances. I think the biggest thing, I saw this out here, and this is what probably intrigues me the most about the Klint Kubiak hire. I'm going to take a sip of coffee to make sure I get this absolutely right. Because again, they may hire a guy before the next show. But we don't know. This is just kind of where I'm leaning right now. I could be totally wrong here. What you are looking for at this stage of the game is you're looking to make a hire for the next decade. You want a guy who you feel can come in and be the head coach of this team for the entire prime of your franchise quarterback. There's alignment there. And I think you've got an ascending offensive mind. in conference in Seattle, a team that's just bullied you tremendously the last 2 years under Mike McDaniel. I think he takes beating the crap out of the Falcons very seriously because, well, he's from here. He went to Centennial High School, went to Georgia. Obviously, Ravens probably should have him too. There's something about Mike McDaniel that I think we're going to learn. We're going to be very appreciative of him as a head coach moving forward. I think when you've got a guy who could even spend 1 year with him, that's huge. But to have a guy that's a little bit younger, again, I think Kubiak's in his 30s, maybe 40, barely. You're looking at a guy, you're always talking about, we got the next Kyle Shanahan. We got the next Sean McVay. Matt LaFleur was with that for the Packers. He was in the building too. Maybe he becomes available. Maybe we consider him. That, to me, gives you the longest pathway of success because if maybe Penix works out, maybe it doesn't. You give him an opportunity to draft his next quarterback in 28 or something like that. You're extending the runway, and you're doing it in a way that's methodical where you're not going to lose your secret sauce with the offensive coordinator. There'll be other coordinators that can stem off. You can start building your own branch. I look at my alma mater of Georgia. Kirby Smart's on the defensive side. Again, college is different. I mean, college and pro are two different sports, but there's guys that have stemmed off the branch of Kirby Smart. We've seen Dan Lanning have a lot of success at Oregon. Obviously, other branches kind of, whether that's Fran Brown's kind of middling, obviously the Sam Pittman and Mel Tucker branch faded. Shane Beamer's kind of doing its own thing there in South Carolina, but like you're giving yourself more opportunities to see. You want Atlanta to be a bastion of creativity, and I think with Kubiak, you might be able to create that necessary foundation. Because when you have that, people want to flock here. You want to be like, you want to be one of the smart kids, not one of the dummies in the NFL. So I'm in favor of Klint Kubiak here. Kevin Stefanski. Again, this is a guy that I'm pretty high on. This is a guy that I've been a fan of since he was with Minnesota. And again, I think he shares there's part of there's some sort of crossover there with the Kubiaks. I think he was there as well. I think with Stefanski, he's been the best head coach the Browns have had since Marty Schottenheimer. I think he's been better than what Belichick was there. You went to the playoffs twice. You play in a very tough, physical AFC North. It hasn't always been smooth sailing. We've seen, the Steelers be the Steelers. We've seen the Ravens have tremendous highs with Lamar Jackson. The Bengals, the same thing with Joe Burrow. And it's interesting they're keeping Andrew Berry as their GM there in Cleveland. I've always thought that was able to overcome some of the dysfunction with Jimmy Haslam. I came across this. This was actually really funny on Twitter this morning. There was a tweet about April of 23, and it talked about Jimmy Haslam becoming a minority owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. And the Bucks have not been the same since then. And it showed a picture. It showed like a series of like a cartoon alligator with like a big snout like out like this, and all the things he can't do. Like he can't take a selfie. He can't open a door. He can't play a violin just because, it's like a cartoon. He's standing up and he's got like the big nose and he just can't figure it out. I think getting a guy like Stefanski who had a lot of success in a very dysfunctional organization. Same thing we'll say with McDaniel too. Coming to another one in Atlanta. I think you're predisposed to that. I think you're conditioned to that. And I think it's not going to derail you as much as some guy who's been on a great franchise. Like one of the things that hurts a lot of these coordinators or coaches or even star quarterbacks, people that play at like certain schools, you play with all the best players and your best teams in this best league. Then you kind of come to this steaming pile of crap and you got to fix it. I think when you have a bit of experience doing that, you recognize it. You're comfortable in it. You're about the grit. You're about the grind. And I don't necessarily know if you can blossom into like a beautiful orchid or whatnot, but like you may not want to be in the muck, but you're not afraid of it. And I think Stefanski could come here with just better ownership with Arthur Blank than what he's had with Jimmy Haslam. Maybe it'll be akin to when he was in Minnesota with like the Wilfs, and again another franchise that hasn't won anything before. I think he'll develop the quarterback play. It'll be interesting to see how he pairs with Ulbrich if we want to keep him here in the GM. But I think this is a guy that, look at it this way, Kevin Stefanski is going to be a head coach in the league next year. There's 9 opportunities out there. 8 if you want to remove the Browns from the equation. someone's going to hire him. And it remains to be seen who it could be. Maybe the Dolphins hire him. Maybe the Raiders hire him. Maybe he's the guy who works with Fernando Mendoza. Maybe the Titans hire him. Maybe we do. Maybe the Giants. I don't think the Ravens will go there or the Steelers, but he will have opportunities out there. And I think this is a guy you got to be damn sure he's not your fit, because I think the chances of him having success in his second opportunity could be substantial. So I'm a big fan of Stefanski. And then Mike McDaniel. I saw this on Twitter too. Somebody said, got to dial up Crazy Mike on the phone. Again, McDaniel has worked for the Falcons. He was part of the Dan Quinn coaching tree. He was like the running backs coach or quality assistant. He's with Shanahan guy. I believe he had to write a giant paper to allow Kyle Shanahan to leave the Browns in 2014 to come to Atlanta. And look, Mike McDaniel, again, is the same sort of thing. He was under Shanahan there in San Francisco. I think he would do fantastic here. Feels very ATL. I think he'd do phenomenal things with Bijan Robinson. And again, I think he'll do better with quarterback because again, last time around, that was the only team that I thought would have hired him. He was just a little bit too unique. And I think he had a lot of success in Miami. Again, Miami is a very difficult place to play. They haven't won a playoff game since the years of the hanging Chad in 2000s. I think if he comes to the Falcons, he's going to probably retain. He'll probably retain. What's his name? Jeff Ulbrich. I mean, Robert Saleh is also a candidate in San Francisco. You hire him, you have Ulbrich, you bring in McDaniel. You kind of got a different variation. Maybe not necessarily the McVay branch, but the Shanahan branch. Maybe that could work. Look, I'd like McDaniel to be in this building in one way, shape, or form. I think he's interviewing. The Titans could be up for him. Browns could be a fit for him too. Again, I don't necessarily know if he's going to get hired as a head coach as much as Kubiak or Stefanski will, but he's a guy that's going to be a coordinator at least. And I think he's just an innovative guy. I think he's got a lot of grit. Again, he was a ball boy for Mike Shanahan in Denver growing up before he played at Yale. Also, I realized that I think he's got the Ivy League connection with Stefanski. I think Stefanski played at Penn. He played at Yale. That could be cool. I just think that, like, this is a guy that, one of the things that I liked about Raheem Morris was he wasn't trying to start some new tradition nonsense here. He knew the good things that made this team special, this franchise special. Not a great head coach, good people person, good dude, good defensive coordinator, probably do really well on television and everything like that. I think just from a schematic standpoint, I think McDaniel adds a little bit more nuance. Like if it's hitting the fan here, I think he can dial something up, whereas he's not going to be sitting there trying to find a way with his hands in his pockets and looking at Zach Robinson, who can't even draw a triangle. So again, I'd be in favor of all three of these guys. Matt LaFleur, if he becomes available from Green Bay, I think that's another guy to consider too. Again, he was the quarterback's coach for Matt Ryan during the Super Bowl team. We'll see what happens there too. Again, there's reasons to believe that any of these guys could potentially fit here. I know I'm very verbose on this episode. Let's get on the second half of our show with some pass. And I can't believe I'm going to do this. This may blow up my face, but I'm going to pump the brakes on hiring John Harbaugh or Mike Tomlin. I'm going to go with Tomlin first, just to get this out of the way. And then I'll touch on Harbaugh. Look, I don't think Tomlin's going to be the guy for the Falcons. I have been one of the biggest critics outside of Pittsburgh about Mike Tomlin for the last 5-6 years. I was talking to my colleague, Josh Urish, who's a Steelers fan, and I'm like, congratulations, man. You are no longer being succumbed to Stockholm Syndrome. Under Mike Tomlin, he would hold the fact he would win 9 and 10 games every year over everybody in Western Pennsylvania's head and wouldn't do a damn thing in the playoffs. TJ Watt has never won a playoff game. Mike Tomlin allowed the Steelers to become the Marvin Lewis Bengals. You knew it. They lost 30-6 to the Texans. CJ Stroud turned the ball over 30 times, or not 30 times, almost 30 times, a fifth of 30 times, 5 times, 6. Whatever. The Steelers scored 6 points there in Rodgers. What a colossal waste of everyone's time and resources. Look, I know that's going to be one of the best jobs out there, but I don't know, man. I don't know who they're going to hire. They're going to hire somebody young, somebody unexpected, because that's what they did with Chuck Noll. That's what they did with Bill Cowher. That's what they did with Mike Tomlin. That's what they do. They don't have a quarterback. They've just been perpetuating nonsense. And again, I think Like, do you want that in Atlanta? I sure as hell don't. Mike Tomlin's just going to go on. He's going to replace Matt Ryan working for CBS alongside Bill Cowher. It's going to be awful and great. I don't know. Maybe he'll go in the booth, replace Tony Romo. Mike Tomlin. Also, the other thing is he's under contract for one more year because he didn't get fired. He resigned. So this will be the same sort of thing that Sean Payton did after leaving the Saints, leaving them out to dry. The Saints haven't been the same since he left, and he kind of drove them into the ground too, being beholden to Drew Brees, and Mickey Loomis is kicking the can down the nonsense crap. Maybe they'll turn a corner now. Maybe they've kind of got something going, but it had been about 5 years of suck in New Orleans. And honestly, even though the Steelers were winning 9 games, it became suck. Just the awful middle. It's like the Indiana Pacers of of Steelers. Like a slightly better version of us, a little more well functioning alcoholic version of the Falcons. I don't want him here. If you hire him, I mean, you're gonna have like one really good season. It might be like the new equivalent of Dan Reeves Falcons football. We'll see. We'll see what happens there, but I don't know. Maybe I don't see it working. I think like also you got to give him picks. We don't have picks. We're not doing that. We got to sell players to the Steelers. Nah. You want to trade Bijan Robinson to the Steelers for Mike Tomlin? Get the hell out of town with that. We're not doing that. Are you kidding me? No way. But yes, Steelers fans can finally breathe. We'll see what happens there. I think that's the best job that's available. I think that also knocks the Falcons down a peg there too. I think the Ravens and Steelers opening up, there are better jobs just because of how long those two guys have been there. People may say the Giants is a better job. Again, you got to work for a John Mara who can't screw in a light bulb. The idea of Jackson Dart doesn't really intrigue me. I think Atlanta's better than you think. Titans, you've got Cam Ward there, but you also got to work with Mike Borgonzi, who could be good, and you got Amy Adams-Strunk, who's just an awful owner. And then there's other things out there, the Cardinals, Browns, who knows what the hell they're going to do. We got to get this right. I did not expect to be in a hiring cycle at this point. I did not expect John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin to both become available. It's like the missed field goal by Tyler Loop is kind of like that meme of like the illusion of choice. It's just a cow staring at it, and it just goes to a slaughterhouse anyway. I don't want Mike Tomlin here. And I'm going to add a little more nuance here with John Harbaugh. He got hired in the same cycle that we hired Mike Smith. They drafted Joe Flacco. We drafted Matt Ryan. They're a better franchise than this. I think there is something that you could do if you get John Harbaugh here. You do it, and you bring Todd Monken here, and I think I could get on board with that. My great concern here is John Harbaugh is a special teams coach. And even though that allows him to be an effective communicator with everybody in the locker room, Baltimore turned him off. And I think Lamar Jackson kind of was just tired of the same stuff. It kind of became some Dan Quinn cliched nonsense. More importantly, he kept wanting to run it back with Zach Orr defensively. John Harbaugh wants all these demands and everything. It kind of feels like Belichick, and maybe the Giants will take him. It seems as though it's the Falcons, the Giants, and the Titans are the teams that he's the most intrigued by. He'll probably interview with all three. He'll probably pick one. And I understand this is divisive. I think people in Atlanta really want John Harbaugh. We had a Harbaugh in this city. We had his brother-in-law, Tom Crean, coaching the Georgia Bulldogs basketball team, and he was hot trash. He gave us Anthony Edwards, though, which I think is cool, but we're better with Mike White now. Harbaugh could provide a level of stability. Again, we interviewed his brother, the eccentric Jim, who's got a show cause and can never work in college football again. Do you kind of want that seediness attached to you? Maybe. There are things I think John Harbaugh can bring that will help. I think there'll be a competitiveness. I think we'll play hard in every preseason game. But when has the Ravens offense ever really been worth a damn? You kind of got Lamar Jackson figuring stuff out on the fly. Zay Flowers is good. And you got Mark Andrews at tight end. It's always been defensive minded. Maybe that'll create some continuity here. I think when you're bringing in a guy like Matt Ryan, where you're trying to reset and he's the figurehead, I think John Harbaugh wants to be number 2 to him. That doesn't work well with me. I think the people that know Matt Ryan would be kind of more in line with that. That doesn't necessarily mean that's who you need to hire. But when you got a head coach with who won a Super Bowl, and I'll tell you this, if the Falcons would have beaten the 49ers, they would have beaten John Harbaugh's Ravens in the Super Bowl in 2012. That team might have been better than the 2016 team. That's the greatest Falcons team that's ever existed. So maybe he is the guy. And again, I'll keep an open mind if the Falcons do hire either of these guys as head coaches. Harbaugh, I'm a little apprehensive because one of the reasons that we did not make the playoffs this year is because Raheem Morris wouldn't adjust. He just stand there on the sidelines and watch us get our teeth kicked in by the Carolina goddamn Panthers. Or, we lose to the Jetty Jets in the rain. Or the Dolphins game where we just fear-peed down our legs for some unbeknownst reason. I just kind of feel like maybe Harbaugh can be some level of a reset, but again, I guess he's in his 60s now. How much longer is he going to do this? You want to do this for another 5-6 years? Then you kind of get into the Bill Belichick territory where it just gets weird. Look how much better they are with Mike Vrabel. Again, I wish we could have hired him, but we couldn't because we hired Arthur Smith. So that's too close to the sun here. I don't know. I'll see what happens. I'll try to keep an open mind on that, but I just feel like there's just layers to this. And I think with the other candidates I mentioned, there may not be. And let's get out of here with some punt. I don't really know who the Falcons are going to hire as their next GM. I do know that they're going to hire a head coach first, and which again, it seems counterintuitive. That's not really the course of action you would do. I'm going to look here on Atlanta Falcons' the Twitter website, the Twitter. So they interviewed 4 other guys for president of football. They interviewed Mike Disner, who is Mike Disner, I believe, is with the Lions, I think, if I'm not mistaken. That doesn't even tell me anything. Way to go there. I'm not going to criticize who that is. So they've interviewed Mike Disner, Brandt Tillis, I believe, who works with Carolina, Josh Williams with, I think, San Francisco is the other one. Yeah, Mike Disner is with Chief Operating Officer of the Lions, Brandt Tillis, Executive Vice President, Football Operations, Carolina. Josh Williams, I believe, with the 49ers. He's the Director of Scouting and Football Operations. And you hired Ian Cunningham, or not hired, you've interviewed Ian Cunningham with the Bears. And I believe, what role does he have with the Bears? I'm trying to scan and read at the same time. Okay, Assistant General Manager since 22. He joined with Ryan Poles. And again, you have to remember this. Matt Ryan's a Boston College guy, and so is Ryan Poles. Brian Flores is also too. So right now, of those 4, between Disner, Tillis, Williams, and Cunningham, I think Cunningham is the favorite to get this job. Again, this is incredibly important. And I think this follow me on this. I'm going to take a sip of coffee, make sure I get this correct, because I got a lot of stuff here. I'm going to try to wrap this show up here in the next 5 minutes or so. I think with Matt Ryan being president of football, the general manager is still a very important role. It's not as important within the hierarchy of the franchise as much as it used to be. Maybe you could argue the same sort of thing with head coach, but we'll see. And I think Matt Ryan will talk to those 4 guys. I think they gathered intel on all of them before they interviewed Matt Ryan last. I think any of those guys could be good fits. And the other thing is Miami has already hired their general manager in John Eric Sullivan. Again, he's got the Packers ties to it. If Matt LaFleur is let go, maybe that's the candidate that Miami hires here. Again, we'll see. Right now, there's no other team out here in the NFL that's looking for a new GM. So we've got time. And maybe that's what it is. Whereas head coach, you've got 8 other teams you're competing with right now for these opportunities. You don't have the best job. You might be a top 3 job. You're not bottom 3. You're somewhere in that 3 to 7 range. And we'll just leave it at that. I think the smart money is probably, I think Buck Bellew of 680 The Fan probably put this out there the best. The most logical thing that they would do is hire Matt Ryan, Ian Cunningham, and Klint Kubiak. I think that trio seems to be the most cohesive in some ways. If you get Josh Williams, then maybe Mike McDaniel is your guy. Maybe Robert Saleh is a candidate you're going after too. You're kind of going the San Francisco route. Brandt Tillis, I think you're gathering intel on the Panthers, which I think is very smart because look, Dave Canellis is a fantastic head coach there in Charlotte. Dan Morgan, we know is a Panther, former Miami player at the U. He's got to build that roster up a little bit more. Maybe a Hero Evero is a candidate you can get to. Again, you got to be head coach because they're going to block that opportunity for him to come to Atlanta. So follow me on this. I think like you're gathering intel across the board. You're learning what Disner might know from what made Detroit good. So you're looking at 4 teams that have, outside of Matt Ryan, San Francisco's who's sustained, Carolina on the come up, the Bears on the come up, and then obviously Detroit on the come up, but kind of on the down tick as well. So you try to pick the minds of you try to pick the minds of Dan Morgan, Ryan Poles, Brad Holmes, and John Lynch without actually going after them. You're gathering intel, basically. And again, I would prefer them to hire a general manager first, but again, what do I know? I'm just a fan trying to react to things. A good and great, like, that's all different, but bad's bad. You can sniff bad out pretty quickly. I do know this for a fact. Matt Ryan being the president of football opens doors for us that I don't think would have been open otherwise. And when that happens, people are willing to hear your pitch. People are willing to see your vision. And at that point, you're opening yourself up to better candidates. Frankly, we shouldn't be competing for the best head coach in the cycle with Baltimore and Pittsburgh because our most recent coach we fired after 2 years. The coach before that was 3, and the guy before that was like 5 or 6. The tenure in Baltimore for John Harbaugh is like 3 to 6 times that. Same with Mike Tomlin. They'll get Pittsburgh and Baltimore like made damn sure we're ready to move on. For us, we had to. But also, if we would have won one more game versus the Jets or the Dolphins or the Patriots, we're in the playoffs right now. Maybe we don't win a game, but we're building forward with this team. But I know you got to go from – you can't mistake mediocre for good. You got to be locked in, and you got to find the right guy for that. Matt Ryan's going to be incredibly busy. I think obviously this past weekend was his last shift of work, if you will, working for CBS. He's full bore. He's got to make 2 big hires here. And obviously NFL draft's coming up. We don't have a first-round pick. We got free agency. We got to make the right stuff. We got to figure out, we got to extend Drake London. Got to figure out if Kyle Pitts is part of this team. Tyler Algier. You name it. We got stuff to do here, man. But this is an exciting time here for Atlanta Falcons football. And this was episode 76 of the Blog and Dirty Podcast. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter at the X at Buhler118. You can follow the show on YouTube at Blog and Dirty FS, over on Twitter at Blog and Dirty. Again, I mostly run the YouTube page, don't run the Twitter page. Be sure to read all of our stuff there on blogandirty.com. Read Falcon stuff on FanSided.com. ATL all day, NFL Spin Zone. You read all my stuff on college football. I predominantly write for Don the Dog, write a lot of stuff for Canes Warning. Who's Your State of Mind? I'm all over the place. Again, college is kind of more of my wheelhouse, but I do like talking about the Falcons. I do like kind of being all in on one fandom right now with consuming the NFL after, being very much a league-centric guy for a very long time. Again, I do a radio hit show on Fridays with Rich Quinones with On Q. Check me out at 505 over on YouTube there. I mostly talk about the NFL there, which allows me to kind of go from a very league-centric thing, but also with the Falcon stuff, talk college and stuff, maybe some baseball. I don't know, man. NBA, whatever. It's an exciting time here. And hit the ticker right anyway. But yeah, we'll be back with you guys with another episode next Wednesday around the same sort of time. Maybe we'll have a hire or two happening between now and then. Again, the divisional round is coming up here. There's 8 teams left in the playoffs. We'll get down to our final 4, and then we'll go from there. So this is all exciting and everything like that. Once again, thanks for listening. And this is the Blog and Dirty Podcast.